Hi guys, today we're looking at the PNSO Nanotyrannus. I have to say this surprised me because I was actually expecting a different announcement. But that's what makes life interesting. And PNSO is
like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
First, let's address the obvious. Nanotyrannus is generally not accepted as valid, but synonymized as a juvenile T-Rex. The back and forth on this is really fascinating to follow. Where one argues the reduction in tooth count from Nanotyrannus to T-Rex has proof of validity, another refutes this, claiming it's seen in tyrannosaurid growth. Where some suggest different limb proportions as potential differentiators, others argue why it isn't. I've never read so much on the whats, whys and wherefores of dentary grooves than when I was following this. And every diagnostic character in the Barker 1988 paper has been challenged. It's really fascinating stuff that we don't have the time to get into here, but I recommend you check out. There's plenty to read online, but actual papers are the best. I'll briefly mention two recent ones. Now first, just last year, Woodward et al. Published a histological study of the femur and tibia of BMRP 2002.4.1, which has been referred by some to Nanotyrannus. And EFS refers to a closely spaced series of LAGs at the periosteal surface. If you have it, it's a sign of skeletal maturity, as you see here in an alligator and ostrich. However, both femur and tibia of 2002.4.1 don't have it. So Woodward et al. Suggests it was a skeletally immature mid-sized juvenile and not an adult, and they argue for niche partitioning between growth stages. Now second, also last year, Dr. Thomas Carr published a paper that strove to produce a single encompassing growth hypothesis. I'll criminally skip lots of the good stuff and just go to this ontogram using analyses from 31 specimens. And you can see there's a lot of variability in skull morphology as T-Rex matures. The study found that the different specimens referred to Nanotyrannus didn't group together, as you'd expect if they were in fact a separate genus. Rather, they sit on the continuum where the smallest juveniles transition into the large adult forms. The more slender and longirostrine skull seems to have transformed to the deep adult form within 2 years, possibly from 13 to 15 years old. And by 15 to 18 years old, the T-Rex was already bigger than closely related tyrannosaurids. Our size doesn't always correlate to the level of maturity. Now for detail, you can check out that paper, freely available online, and also Dr. Thomas Carr's blog article I'll link to below. Now that said, I understand as much as most people have accepted Nanotyrannus as T-Rex, while dismissing the Bloody Mary specimen out of hand, there are people in other parts that may not, or do so with reservations. Now personally, I believe that parsimony suggests it's either a juvenile of T-Rex or possibly some other tyrannosaurid, but I don't see Bloody Mary as a non-issue, and it would be exceedingly useful if we could get a hold of it for proper study. And meanwhile, believe what you will and stay happy. So here's the in-hand model, literally, of Logan. And you can see how small he is. Now my hands are pretty damn small. At 17 centimeters or 6.7 inches and an estimated Nanotyrannus size of 5.2 meters or 17 feet, that makes this roughly 1 to 30th scale. For 1 to 35 scale, the life size would be about 6 meters or 20 feet, which we could justify as the T-Rex continued to grow in size. And to further give you the idea, here he is next to the PNSO Austin, the Pachycephalosaurus. It's almost a miniature. The head has the low longirostrine form consistent with what we know of juvenile tyrannosaurids. The shape of the head seems to fit quite well with the skull, with a tiny lacrimal crest. The facial integument is consistent with what we saw in Wilson, with larger scales on the oral margins. There are no lips, and the jaw is articulated for consistency with the rest of PNSO's theropods, even at this small size. In fact, the very small size makes everything else that much more impressive. Not just the detail, but also the professionalism of the sculpting that could have chosen to omit many things. The soft tissue design of the jaw follows Wilson, with these muscular walls forming a sort of pseudo-cheek. The tiny teeth are well defined, and the paint application is really good for the size. Now I say this with reservations because up close, there's a bleeding, especially on the left side in mine. But at normal viewing distances, honestly, they look pretty good, and you'll just see sharply defined white teeth. I'm also happily surprised that the eyes can be painted so carefully. Although the irises of mine are just the slightest bit askew. And from the front, it has the same stereoscopic vision of view as the T-Rex. Initially, my impression looking at the release images was the scales were the same oversized look as Wilson. In hand, it follows more the aesthetic we've seen this year. Though probably still a little too big for the scale, it is so exquisite, it's not egregious, and you'll more likely be marveling at how they could get such tiny, defined scales at this size. If they had this same size on the Wilson, I suspect it would be the bee's knees for most people. Paint-wise, it has the familiar striped theropod pattern, but much lighter in colour than Wilson, with a tendency towards pinkish hues in much of the ventral body. Now, whether PNSO intended this to serve double duty as a juvenile T-Rex or a standalone Nanotyrannus, I think they could have added some down, which would make a nice growth series from the baby Aaron here, with its downy filaments, to the naked adult. The female T-Rex Andrea will soon be out, with which you could then create a nice family diorama. I'm still undecided if I'll get her. Now the arms are proportionately larger in the juvenile than the adult, as should be the case. Claws are finely tipped with small sharp points and painted very carefully. Now the legs are muscle with more gracile proportions than the adult. And the toe claws have the same blunting like Wilson does, which makes sense as the animal wears them down with walking. And without a base, it stands perfectly, although as always, I highly recommend using it to avoid warping issues later. Now let's end by a comparison scan between Logan and Wilson. You can see they really make a pair. And to really drive home an idea of the size, here's the collecting Metriacanthosaurus, the Safari Dilophosaurus, the Collectae baby T-Rex. And just for fun, if you also collect dragons, here he is next to the figure builder Safi Jiva. So that's it for the juvenile T-Rex or Nanotyrannus. You know, it really shouldn't matter what's the name on the box. A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet if you like the sculpt and the scale. If you don't, they'll stink just the same, and you could just skip it and save the aggravation. Now personally, I think it's a nice representation of either, and I'm thoroughly impressed by what PNSOs achieve at this small size, and I see this becoming the standard against which future small size models will be measured. Its miniature stature, however, might actually make this a non-essential if you're trying to save money, especially if the new EU taxes hit you badly. So that's it for the PNSO Nanotyrannus or Juvie T-Rex. Stay happy, don't get too emotional about what's in the name, and I'll be back with another review soon.